Hey everybody, my name is Jared and I am a Master Mason in the state of Mississippi in the United States of America, and this is the Forget-Me-Not tie by Edgar Alejandro over at Masonic Revival. And if you're interested in doing some self-study, go learn about the Forget-Me-Not, the symbol of the flower called Forget-Me-Not. It's a symbol that has been used by many organizations and cultures around the world as a symbol of charity, and some make perhaps an unfounded claim towards its use in Freemasonry, but either way it certainly works in Freemasonry, so something for you to check out there. Here in the Fellowcraft degree, you're going to notice that we're making a big skip. If you're watching these videos as I hope you would, and watching them in order from the beginning, at the very beginning of the Entered Apprentice degree playlist, all the way through now, then you're going to notice that suddenly we made a big jump. In the Entered Apprentice degree, we went from reading a scripture and then had several different things before we talked about the working tools of an Entered Apprentice. Here in the Fellowcraft degree, none of that work is written down in the state of Mississippi, so it is all a secret. But what I can say is that part of what we're skipping over are some of the things we also had to skip over, but we mentioned that they existed in the Entered Apprentice degree, such as the oath. At this point you would have already taken the oath of a Fellowcraft, and now you're going to be presented with an explanation of the working tools. Previously we mentioned that you already were introduced to the square and to the plumb. There is one more working tool we need to cover, and that is called the level. Now all of these, again, even going back to the Entered Apprentice degree, are operative tools that we find in stonemasonry and many other trades. Here we try to think about them in a speculative way. So we want to speculate what other kind of meanings can we draw from these tools or the symbols of these tools. Here in the Fellowcraft's degree, we are told that the working tools of a Fellowcraft: the plumb is an instrument made use of by operative masons to raise perpendiculars, the square to square their work, and the level to lay horizontals. But we, as free and accepted masons, are taught to make use of them for more noble and glorious purposes. The plumb admonishes us to walk uprightly in our several stations before God and man, squaring our actions by the square of virtue, and remembering that we are traveling upon the level of time, to that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. I don't want to belabor the subject of the operative uses of these tools. I have touched on them, I think, fairly well in the first two videos, except for the level. And while there may be some people who have a general understanding of how these tools are used, I am well aware that there are going to be many people who are not familiar with these tools because they've never done a building project where they've had to use this kind of instrumentation, and so it's a foreign subject to them. So if you'll permit me, I'm going to touch on them just ever so slightly. So by the plumb, the operative mason is to raise horizontals. So that refers back to making a wall that is straight up and down, so raising horizontals. And then the square, to square their work. We talked about how a framing square isn't used to grade inches or centimeters, it's used to grade degrees. We're looking for a true 90-degree angle, so squaring their work. You can imagine somebody using this as a stonemason to make sure that the edges and surfaces of any sort of brick that they are making is square on all of its edges. And for a level, laying horizontals. So we're talking about making sure that the floor of something is perfectly level. Now, to think about them speculatively, to speculate what else we might get out of these, the plumb admonishes us to walk uprightly in our several stations before God and man. So we're learning that not only is this to be something that is an outward appearance of walking uprightly, but something that we understand that the divine is constantly watching us, and that we must be true to ourselves, that we are walking uprightly and justly because God is watching too. So this is a direct relation to our moral conduct and how we walk uprightly before God and man. We're also told to square our actions by the square of virtue. And we talked about that in the very first video of this series, talking about how we need to make sure that we're dealing with all mankind, whether it's a Freemason, our best friend, or somebody we've never even met, and even people we don't like, that we're being true and honest people with them, whether or not they want to be with us. So being virtuous and measuring ourselves by that 90-degree angle. Are we really true? Are we on the square? And ever remembering that we are traveling on the level of time to that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. So in this case, the level reminds us that in the eyes of God, we are all equal. And at the end of life, we will all go to the same place. So here we have to remember that it doesn't matter what our station in life is. It doesn't matter how successful we are, how successful we feel, or if it's the other side of the coin, how unsuccessful we feel, or how much struggle we feel that there is, or how much unfairness we feel might be placed against us. At the end of it all, we're traveling on the level of time and going to that country from whose bourne no traveler returns. So to say it more plainly, we're all going to die in the end, and we need to remember that and be true and upright with everybody, no matter what their station or position is in life. So the level really teaches us quite a lot, and there's quite a lot that we can extrapolate from that, and more that we will be taught about that in the future. And I think it's worth pointing out here that the plumb and the level need more of your attention. The square gets a lot of attention because it's right there, it's in our face. We have the square and compasses. We see it all the time. We can't get away from it. But the plumb and the level, while they're very important in the teachings of Freemasonry, they don't get mentioned by name very much. We have to look for it and understand, oh wow, here's the plumb again, and understand what it applies to and what teachings were being given at that moment, and the level as well. And we'll get into some more of that as we progress further in the degree and further into our Master Mason degree. But because it's not in front of us in a symbolic way, like the square and compasses, it's something we need to take the time to purposefully remember as we're going about our daily lives and as we're studying our education and trying to glean more out of the lessons of Freemasonry. So, the working tools of a Fellowcraft, the plumb, square, and level. And for all of you that are trying to remember this and you're working through your degrees, if it helps you at all, one thing that I've always used in my mind to remember plumb, square, and level, and to get it in my head in that order, is to imagine a plumb and then a square and then a level. So it's like you got the plumb sitting right up, and then it splits itself in half into a square, and then it falls over on itself to make a level. So it's silly. It is anywhere in Masonic teaching that's how you should think about it. But if it helps you have a key in your mind on how to remember the order of it as you're learning your proficiency or anything else, then there you have it. So if the plumb, square, and level, the working tools of a Fellowcraft, are explained in a different way or have more meaning to you that you'd be willing to share down below, or any other keys or memory tips that you might have to share with people, I'd encourage you to leave those down in the comments below so that we can learn from each other. Next, we're going to step into the second section of the Fellowcraft degree, which, depending on where you live, has just a host of different terms that it is called. It is the second section lecture, it is the staircase lecture, it is the middle chamber lecture, it's the winding stairs. So depending on where you live, I may not even have mentioned the terminology that's used for you. But if you're a follower of the channel, then you know that I've already touched on this subject twice before in other videos many years ago, and now I'm going to give them a little bit more detail. So you know that this particular lecture is near and dear to my heart. I love this lecture. I love giving it in Lodge. I love especially doing it for a live degree and not just practice. And I'm going to the next video will be the entire staircase lecture in full, because I think there's some value in hearing it all at one time. And then we're going to go back and do a series of videos as a part of this series explaining the different sections found within the staircase lecture. So one video as a big overview, something for you to constantly come back to, and then for the purpose of deeper education, we're going to flesh it out into multiple videos and really get into what kind of things we can learn from this middle chamber lecture and the numerous differences that you're going to see in various jurisdictions, at least around the United States. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch. We'll see you next time. Bye.